Israel discovers the largest tunnel so far in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas begins recruiting out of Lebanon. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 9 a.m. Central on Monday, December 18th, 2023. Updated casualty information can be found at the links in the description below, published by the IDF, as well as the Gaza Health Ministry and Al Jazeera. So starting with a map, looking at one here presented by the Institute for the Study of War as of December 17th. A couple things to walk through here, starting in the north around Gaza City. The light blue areas are reported Israeli clearance operations, and there has been confirmation of Israeli forces just about in every area that's light blue up there in the north. These are ongoing clearance operations. So I think it's tempting when we compare this to maps used in Ukraine to say this is the forward line of advance, this is now Ukrainian or Russian-held territory. That's not how the war in Gaza is or is going to play out. This is much more of an insurgency, counterinsurgency type operation. So while those clearance operations are ongoing, none of those areas are necessarily entirely cleared of Hamas militants. But again, up north, you can see the continued push in and around Jabalia, Gaza City, kind of a stronghold of Hamas in the north. Moving to the south, in the southeastern portion of the Gaza Strip, that area in light brown is where Israel has announced that civilians should evacuate, which so far in this war has meant that a large ground incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces is forthcoming. Israel has continued to push in and around the Khan Yunis area, and we've seen quite a bit of footage coming out from the south of pretty intense fighting, relatively close-range engagements between the IDF and Hamas. So expect that to continue, even at the point when the entire Gaza Strip is that shade of light blue for ongoing clearance operations. There's likely still to be fighting taking place all across the Gaza Strip. Then we got a couple videos put out by Israel showing a 4-kilometer-long stretch of a significant tunnel approaching the Araz crossing between Gaza and Israel. I'm going to start with one here that's kind of an animation of sorts to give you an idea of what we're going to see when I show the actual footage from inside of the tunnels here in a moment. So tunnels are not like trenches. This is likely connected to another portion of the underground network. It looks like, from what we've seen, Israel has been able to clear a significant portion, but at some point it stops, and there's still further clearance to be had throughout this underground tunnel network. Whereas a trench, you might have just a 10, 15 kilometer or 10, 15 meter stretch of trench line, not necessarily connected to anything else. That's not going to be the case with these underground networks. So there we see the probably extent of where Israel has cleared so far. So then we've got a video of Israel identifying, locating, and then digging out a portion of that tunnel. Engineering assets here somehow located this, maybe ground penetrating radar, human intelligence, something of the sort. You can see they access this tunnel from a couple different points. So it looks like one is somewhat of an entrance or an endpoint in the tunnel. Another one, they're kind of cutting through the side of the tunnel, which makes sense when this is a military operation, right? They have to open that thing up, expecting that on the other side of that barrier are Hamas militants ready to engage the Israeli forces. So if you can, in a tunnel network approach from multiple directions, it's going to be that much more likely that you'll be able to successfully clear the area. Then we shift over to where Israeli forces are moving into the tunnel. Likely it was already cleared before the video starts moving in, but you can see how big this is compared to some of the other tunnels that are maybe 3 to 4 feet across. This one can facilitate a vehicle, and we'll show that here in a second. The IDF did release some footage captured from Hamas. It's not clear when they uncovered this intelligence, if it was recent, if it's when they moved into this tunnel, or if it was a long time ago in previous raids into Gaza or provided by sources they might have in Gaza. But it shows the construction going on for this tunnel. This is significant, right? It's one thing to dig a little, tunnel underneath your house or something like that, but to build something of this size takes, professional tunneling equipment. It's a major operation. They show one of the blast doors here. I think I'd probably call this like an improvised blast door. It'll do the trick. It'll stop an explosion on one side. Stop. Looks like probably most small arms from penetrating. We did see some of these doors underneath the Shifa Hospital and some of the footage coming out there. It looks very similar in a lot of ways to what's being uncovered here. Looks like a view into a tunnel from the tunnel. So multiple layers of this tunnel network. And I think that's something that's kind of gone underreported, is we have this idea that it's just going to be one layer, one network of tunnels moving all throughout Gaza. But, if we go back to past conflicts where tunnels played a significant role, Vietnam is always an easy one to go to. Those Viet Cong tunnels were not 2 feet underground and just in a straight line. Often they moved, multiple layers with like bunkers underground, command centers, significant. I did see this it's hard to tell if this kind of jail cell looking thing is simply a door to protect people or to prevent people from coming and going, or if that's actually designed as some sort of underground holding cell for detainees. We have been hearing, of course, from very early on, the first hostages that were able to be released back into Israel, that they are being held underground, which should not be a surprise at this point. So they are being held in some of these tunnels. The IDF also released this footage here that they, again, acquired at some point in the past that appears to show this tunnel network that they just uncovered and are clearing. This video shows Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, driving a car with his brother Mohammed Sinwar, the commander of Hamas's Khan Yunis battalion, or the brigade operating in and out of Khan Yunis. Just shows how significant these tunnels are, right? They can drive cars through them. Think about the amount of equipment that can flow through this underground network. And then Hamas released kind of their answer to this, if you will, in a video they titled, "You Arrived Late, Mission Accomplished." So in this video, they show Israeli leadership moving through these tunnels that were recently identified and cleared. And then it shifts over to Hamas militants moving through this tunnel to carry out their attack on Israel on October 7th. And then set to music playing in the background, they show a bunch of, Hamas shows their guys in Israel killing Israelis and then capturing hostages and moving them back through these tunnels into Gaza. Then we got a couple notable items put out by Hamas in the last 24 hours. The first is what I believe the first video recording of Hamas firing an anti-tank guided missile at Israeli forces in Gaza. So we know that Hamas has this capability. It's not a secret. Haven't seen a lot of it. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but most of the video footage we've seen have been RPGs, rockets, mortars, small arms fire, things like that. There was some speculation when these weren't making an appearance in the early days of the ground incursion into Gaza that perhaps Hamas was pulling these further into places like Khan Yunis and Gaza City to engage Israeli forces once they get further into those urban environments. One video showing an ATGM does not confirm or deny that speculation, but again, notable that the first ATGM video came out yesterday. Additionally, Hamas put out a statement talking about kind of the status of the war and how they view everything playing out so far. They said, quote, "For 73 days, the fascist Israeli occupation has been conducting its genocidal war against our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. They said all of this and more are taking place before the eyes of the world with the blatant support of the United States, United Kingdom, and some European countries in light of the inability of the dysfunctional international communities and all UN institutions to stop this aggression. They said the only achievement of the Israeli occupation is war crimes, genocide, massive killing of women and children, the destruction of infrastructure, and the elimination of all aspects of life. Then in closing, they say, we continue to say that the U.S. administration is totally responsible for these massacres and violations taking place at the hands of the Israeli occupation army in Gaza through the U.S. unconditional delivery of weapons to kill Palestinians without any form of accountability. So again, something I've continued to harp on since the opening days of this war is in the United States, we might look at this and view this as a regional issue or an Israeli issue that they got to handle, and we shouldn't be concerned at all, but it does affect us. Even if you don't want it to, it does. A lot of what's happening in Gaza right now is being pinned by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by Iran, and other groups around the world as the United States doing that. Israel is just doing our bidding, a lot of them say. And I've got a video coming out later this week or early next talking about some of the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda propaganda, how they are using the Israeli invasion of Gaza to recruit more people into their ranks and promote the idea of carrying out further terrorist attacks against the United States and other Western targets. Hamas announced that they're going to start recruiting and building a new organization in Lebanon, but the people of Lebanon are not necessarily on board. So Memory did a good dive into some of the feedback coming out of this. Hamas said they're building this organization called the Vanguards of the Al-Aqsa Flood, which is the name of the operation they carried out in Israel on October 7th. A couple reasons that this might be happening that the analysts get into here. They say one is to strengthen Hamas in Lebanon's Palestinian refugee camps ahead of turning them into a new base for Hamas's leadership that is currently based in Gaza. So the idea being that at some point, we'll get into this in a second, at some point, some of these Hamas militants and leadership might be able to evacuate Gaza and make their way into southern Lebanon. Easier said than done. That would be very, very difficult for a lot of them. But anyways, the other goal they get at here for standing up this new organization, this new branch of Hamas in Lebanon, is to potentially gain more support for Hezbollah among the Sunnis and draw more resistance fighters into South Lebanon to participate in the fight against Israel. So Hamas is a Sunni organization, Hezbollah is Shia, so there is a little bit of a disconnect there. A Hamas spokesperson, in announcing this new recruiting push, said Hamas is present in the 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. We saw the intense support for Hamas, and there is no choice but to cultivate it. This was done with the knowledge that this project is not just military, but is aimed at engaging all of the Palestinians according to their abilities in the fields of media, politics, charity, guidance, education, or military action, with the aim of incorporating as many Palestinians as possible. And that's one of the pushbacks that we're seeing from people inside of Lebanon is they don't want Hamas at all setting up shop in Lebanon, especially a branch of Hamas that's going to be carrying out attacks against Israel. Now, again, some of the reasons why Hamas might be wanting to do this. One, of course, the simplest one is they need more manpower. They want more fighters to come into Gaza and to participate in their war with Israel. Another one here is that if they stand up a leadership structure, an organization in Lebanon, that kind of makes Israel's goal of the elimination of Hamas even harder. So even if Israel is to completely take over all of the Gaza Strip and occupy the Gaza Strip and eliminate every single Hamas militant and leader in that area, Hamas isn't gone because now they've got this organization up in southern Lebanon. And if Israel wants to eliminate them, they're going to war with Lebanon. Now, this does kind of gloss over the fact that so many of Hamas's leaders are outside of Gaza in the first place. Already there's a bunch of them in Lebanon, Qatar, and other places all around the world. But it's a valid point that if Hamas stands up another military organization in Lebanon, it kind of, makes things even more complicated for Israel. The analysts also say a goal here might be to turn South Lebanon into a sort of resistance axis land. Remember this axis of resistance, kind of loosely Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis down in Yemen, and then some of the militias operating in Syria and Iraq. The analysts say, quote, more importantly, there is a possibility that some Hamas fighters may leave the Gaza Strip the minute Israel completes its military operation there. The vanguards of the Al-Aqsa flood may then facilitate the entry of some or all of these Hamas fighters into Lebanon. The country will thus become a base for military and security action. Again, easier said than done for any Hamas militant, and especially the Hamas leadership, to at some point, either during or after the fighting, just get up and move into Lebanon will be a significant task. But again, one of the things they point to here is by standing up this new Hamas organization in Lebanon, it could set the stage for that transfer of personnel and equipment to happen down the road. Now, I thought we were about to hit 24 hours without a Houthi attack in the Red Sea. I was wrong. They're at it again. So the Houthis put out a statement saying, with the help of God Almighty, the naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces carried out a military operation against 2 ships linked to the Zionist entity. The first was the Swan Atlantic ship loaded with oil, and the other was the MSC Clara carrying containers. The spokesperson for Houthi put out a statement saying exactly what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. I thought it was actually worth running through here piece by piece. So they said, Yemen considers Israel a threat to the nation as people and states and is a real threat to the unity of the Islamic nation. They said the Yemeni operations have a major economic impact on the Israeli enemy and are an argument against the countries of the Islamic world. They say there is communication with active and influential countries, and the goal is to achieve the declared goals of lifting the siege on Gaza and stopping the aggression against it. The Palestinian issue is non-negotiable, and we cannot accept what is happening to the people of Gaza. They say any actions carried out by the Yemeni armed forces are related to lifting the siege on Gaza and stopping the aggression against it. If you want to stop naval operations against the Israeli enemy, you must lift the siege on Gaza and bring in food and medicine. We affirm that the Red Sea is safe, except for ships linked to the Israeli enemy, and we praise the position of the Chinese company to stop sending its ships to the ports of the occupying entity. So a couple pieces there. Before Israel went in on the ground in Gaza, Iran kind of drew a red line in the sand, if you remember, saying if Israel goes into Gaza, we're going to have to do something. I think a lot of people interpreted that to mean that Iran would take military action, direct military action against Israeli targets. That didn't happen. And at first glance, I think there's a lot of views of good. It didn't escalate. This didn't turn into a broader regional war. But it was right about that time the Houthis started getting after it. And this is a direct proxy from Iran. In fact, a lot of their targeting data as to what ships to go after and not go after is likely coming from Iran, just based off the intelligence capabilities between the two countries. Iran is going to have a much greater access and much greater ability to discern which ships meet this criteria and which ships don't. So when you look out across the Arab world, for all of the countries, the individuals, and the groups that have spoken out against Israel and spoken up for the Palestinian people, the one organization right now that is really taking definitive action and, again, drawing their own line in the sand are the Houthis down in Yemen. They are going to continue targeting any shipping loosely aligned with Israel. These aren't necessarily Israeli ships, but anything that potentially could go to an Israeli port until they say the siege of Gaza is lifted. But that's all I've got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on a Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're up on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.